are. So before asking for questions, I would like to say a few things about Eileen's talk. Um, the first is she talked about Sitagarba, Jijang Bosal, Jizo in Japanese, being in hell until all beings are awakened from hell. And also, she talked about how this is a special month when the ghosts and the hungry ghosts and the hell beings roam the earth. And I would just like to say that we right now are all in hell, and we all right now are in heaven. And this great vow to liberate all beings is something that we are all intimately part of, whether consciously or not. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. It's not so special to have hungry ghosts roaming the earth, because hungry ghosts are always roaming the earth. And their names are Carol and Nancy and Judy and Eileen and Mary and Marco and Lori and Narina and MD, who's internally connecting to audio, and Judith's iPad, and all the people in the Providence Zen Center. We're all hungry ghosts, and our job is to liberate all beings, which includes ourselves, from being hungry ghosts. That's the first thing I wanted to say. And the second thing I wanted to say is I wanted to talk a little bit about Ryonin Gyatso, who Eileen talked about, the nun who burned her face in order to study Buddhism because she was so beautiful that she would not be allowed in any monastery in Japan. First of all, I heard it differently. I heard it that the hot iron was right there in front of the Zen master who was refusing her entrance, and she just simply picked up in front of him and burnt her face like that. Also, Eileen, I don't know about losing beauty. I mean, it's okay. Maybe we never had it, you know? You know, what one culture thinks is beautiful, another culture doesn't, so you don't have to worry about losing beauty as you age. You know, it's all right, you know. But anyway, Ryonin Gyatso burned her face, and if anyone noticed that my eyes seemed to be not quite focused, it's because I was trying to look up the calligraphy that she did. She did a calligraphy she wrote a poem about this experience. And I almost thought of getting up and going to my bookshelf and getting the book down and showing it to you. And I tried to find it online and I couldn't find it online. And it's a poem that basically said, you know, once I was beautiful and then I burnt my face and now, you know, I'm free, something like that. And she was a wonderful calligrapher. She was well known for her calligraphy. And you can find this calligraphy in a book called the Zen Source Book that my husband Stan Lombardo and me and mostly Steve Addis edited. And so I almost went up and got it to show you, but I didn't because it would be too disturbing. But the point is that there was a calligraphy exhibit in Kansas at the University Art Museum in Lawrence, where I live, about maybe 20, 25, 30 years ago. And this calligraphy was there. And I'd known the story. And by the way, it's not Hakuin, it's his teacher. Although Wikipedia thinks it's Hakuin, but it's not. It's his teacher. I get this from other teachers of Japanese lineage. But anyway, so it's Hakuin's teacher with the baby, and I'll get to that in a minute. But anyway, so there was this calligraphy, and it was right there. It was physical. I'd known the story about Ryonin Gyatso. I'd heard this story for many years, but there it was. This woman was real. She was palpable, and she left this physical evidence behind. It's not like a poem you read in a book. It's like her writing. It's her calligraphy, and I just, you know, even now I get chills just thinking about it. That this was like, I really wanted to touch it. I knew better, there were guards around and stuff, but that this woman was real and that she left this physical evidence through the centuries and across cultures that she had done this and she had freed herself. and she had freed all of us. So I just wanted to tell you that. And also, so Eileen told the story of the man who was the monk who was accused of impregnating this woman, and so the parents gave the baby, the woman's parents gave the baby to him, and he raised the baby for a few years, and the woman confessed, no, it wasn't the monk, and it's attributed to Hakuin, and that the monk is Hakuin, but it was not. It was Hakuin's teacher. But to me, the thing about that story that's so remarkable is not that he raised the baby without complaint, but it's that he was able to give it away. I mean, he was the baby's father for all intents and purposes. He raised that baby. That was who the baby knew in his life. And that he was able to just say, okay, baby, you should go back to the people who really want you. That's kind of incredible. And if you've ever known people who are foster parents, that's what they do. They take in people's children, knowing that they're not going to keep them. And they take them in and they love them, and then they give them up. And that's a remarkable thing to be able to do. To love somebody completely, and then to say, you're better off, it's better for you, and not try to hold on, and just say, I love you, and now you need to go where you belong. That's a really remarkable thing. So to me, that's the amazing thing about that story. So now I'll ask, are there any questions?
Name. It's Quan Hang.
And hi, Sam.
Yeah, I kind of had a question, and it started with other people last week that they talked to me, and also it kind of like ended a little bit now when you spoke about this nun who burnt her face and got enlightenment, and then you said, and she saved everybody. So the question that they had for me last week was, so we're practicing, and while we're practicing, there's all this social stuff going on. Black Lives Matter, the vote, and all of these issues that are appearing right now here in the US. And so they said, what about that? And what about our practice? And so, but there's this idea that fundamentally we're already saved. Okay. And then if we're already saved, then what's going on? So could you talk about that already?
Yeah. So if you look, let's take the example of African American culture. If you look at African American culture through the centuries, it's really clear that people were, in a very deep sense, already saved. You listen to gospel, black gospel music, and it's free. It's completely free. I mean, you listen to someone like Aretha Franklin, and this is real spiritual freedom. But at the same time, there's this terrible oppression. So spiritual freedom and awakening does not mean that there's not things that have to be fixed. Also, sometimes you run into someone who's maybe a life in prison sentence, someone who's been in prison for a long time, and they can be really free. They're in prison. They don't decide what they get to eat. They don't decide when they get to eat. They don't decide when they get to shower. I mean, their lives are so completely constricted. But even there, it's possible to have freedom. So that's the kind of liberation that Zen practice offers. That's the kind of liberation that any serious spiritual practice offers. But at the same time, there's suffering. The same person can be inside, they can be completely free. And yet at the same time, they're under terrible constraints and maybe physical pain. So at the same time, there's suffering. So this liberation that we all have can give us the energy and the direction to help with this other suffering, help alleviate this physical suffering. I mean, can you imagine living in Kabul right now? It's going to fall to the Taliban. They're completely surrounded. The government is trying to negotiate some kind of, peaceful transfer of power. I have no idea what that's going to mean. If you're living in Kabul right now, your world is just falling completely apart. You do not know what's going to happen tomorrow. You do not know if people are going to come and knock on your door. You do not know if you're going to be dragged out of your house. You do not know if your young daughter is going to be given away in marriage to somebody that she doesn't even know. You do not know any of that. If you're a woman, you don't know if tomorrow you'll be able to walk down the street to get a loaf of bread. You do not know. That is fundamentally all of our situation. And how do we find the inner strength to help each other in this situation that we're all in? So this liberation, we all have it, and we can all access it, but it's not now I'm happy all the time. Woo-hoo-hoo, the world is great. All these people who this gratitude stuff, well, yeah, be grateful for what you should be grateful for. But, there's this kind of artificial level where you have to tell yourself you're happy all the time. No, don't do that. When you suffer completely 100%. And when someone else is suffering, help them completely 100% to the best of your capability. That's our job. Just be completely open. And this practice gives us the strength to do that. This practice gives us this strong center. It gives us this direction, this not for me direction. So it's not my life is falling apart. It's like we are in this together. We're just completely in this together and realizing that. So that's what our practice gives us, and this clear mind where you can see what is actually happening and not what you think is happening and not what you fear is happening, but you can actually see what is happening. So does that answer the question, maybe?
It's good. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah. Are there any other questions?
I have another question here from Providence, Zen Master.
Please call me Judy.
Oh, okay, Judy. So the question goes as such. I find the story of the nun who burned her face very disturbing. How do you understand that a Buddhist master would not accept this woman as she was?
Nobody's perfect. We're all a product of our time and place. So he's brought up a certain way. Just because you have this awakening doesn't mean you're not going to blow it all the time. So he was in this time and place where if a beautiful court woman came to you and said, I want to study in your monastery, there were women's temples, and she had actually practiced in the women's temples, but the women's temples, they weren't as serious. And this has been true until very recently in Buddhism, that not always, but often the women's temples, they didn't have the same access to like really strong practice or sutra study or a lot of things. Maybe they would just chant, or maybe they would just do helpful things in the village or something like that, but they didn't have this really hard training that she wanted. I should say that in Korea there's a women's temple where I've been, and I think maybe Nancy, you've been there too, maybe Eileen, you've been there, where the women do is it a 3-year kyolche or a 1-year kyolche? I forget. 3 years, yeah. They do a kyolche for 3 years. 3 years. They sit in kyolche. That is called hard training, right? We do 3 months and we think we're pretty cool, but they do 3 years, So I'm not saying women are not capable of strong practice, Lord knows. But at that time, in Japan, the possibility of having strong training in a women's temple, it just didn't exist. And so she wanted to practice in a men's temple. But this guy, he's thinking, oh my God, my monks will be filled with lust and they won't be good monks. And that's all he's thinking about. He didn't trust his monks. It's the idea. A woman walks into a building and all the monks, they get erections or something like that. And boing, and so this kind of, cultural kind of, you know, everyone has this kind of cultural blindness one way or another. Every culture has it. You know, it just expresses itself differently. So yeah, so this guy's a product of his culture. It's not like you wake up and, you know, then, you know, you're free of all that. The Korean tradition is really great because in the Korean tradition, coming from Chinul, Chinul had four great awakenings, and every one of them took place in a library, which I really love. It's not, you know, like he stumbles on the path and his foot hits a rock, and then he wakes up, or he hears the temple bell in a distance and he wakes up, or he sees two people fighting in the street and he wakes up. No, he wakes up by opening a book in a library. And he had four big awakenings like this. And anyway, so Chinul's big thing, which was very different from, you know, the Chinese teaching of the time. Chinul was, I think, 11th century. So Chinul's big thing was waking up. The experience of waking up is a signal that you have to practice even harder. So it's not like you practice and practice and practice and then Kensho and you wake up and everything's fabulous. No, it's not that. It's like you practice and you wake up and then, oh my God, I have to practice more. And you practice and practice and practice and then you have another awakening. Whoa, I have to practice more. So the idea is you have to practice, and he's very explicit about this. You have to keep practicing because you still have karma. And you have to cut through this karma. And the experience of awakening is not going to cut through that karma. So that's Chinul's teaching. And that's Korean tradition. And that explains why this Zen master, seeing this beautiful woman, would not let her in the monastery. Because, yeah, he had many awakenings probably, but he still had karma. And we all still have karma. And nobody is ever done. That's very important. No one is ever done. So thank you very much for your question. Are there any other questions? Do you want to move that microphone so I can see the person asking questions? Because the minute you go to the microphone, you disappear.
I didn't,
Oh,
I didn't have a question, but you know, within our school, we're also having this issue of should we just only be practicing, or should we be doing social things? And it has, you know, some folks have left, and just because we're either getting too active or we're not active enough. And
yeah, that's a really important point, and that's actually something that, as a teacher, as a new teacher, you will discover the teachers are talking about. So I can only tell you my personal feeling about this. We want to be completely inclusive, and that means being completely inclusive of all political opinions. That's my feeling. So I don't want Kansas Zen Center or the Quantum School of Zen to take political stands that someone with a sincere desire to practice might disagree with. Like, I don't think we should campaign for candidates for office, for example. I know some Zen centers in Japanese tradition that before an election, they'll send people out to help get out the vote and stuff like that. And they're helping get out the vote for Democrats. And I'm not in favor of that. And again, I'm speaking personally because as a school, we don't have a stance on that. On the other hand, you come to things like, you think of what if something like, you know, the Nazis rounding up Jews, what if something like that is happening? Then it's very clear to me you have to take a stand, because that's not political. That's a question of morality. That's a question of evil. And when you see a group of people being treated like that, yes, you have to take a stand. And then almost everything falls in between. And so the question of how we as a school should deal with it, and how our local Zen centers should deal with it, this is a really important and interesting issue. What I tend to come down on is to encourage sort of social action like helping the homeless or helping food pantries. Um, I want to encourage people to do things in the community. So a couple of us at the Zen Center join with the Jewish Center to provide food for the homeless once a month. Well, food for, they don't have to be homeless, for the soup kitchen once a month. So that's a kind of concrete, it's completely apolitical, but at the same time it's helping. And then I also encourage people to act on their convictions. So if someone wants to do something political as an individual, I encourage that. I don't tell them what it should be, but I encourage, because what is the point of our practice if we don't act on our wisdom, whatever our wisdom is, even if I personally consider it highly unwise. So, but the question of, as you point out, Sunim, whatever we do, someone's going to get pissed off at us. And so the question is, what are the sort of criteria that we use to ask ourselves, when should we as a school, or when should our local Zen centers, in our local Zen centers, when should we as our Zen center step out and make some kind of political statement? And then I'll say something else, which is I don't have a lot of faith in political statements anyway. I tend to believe in action. I, be in the demonstration, give money where you want to give money, provide food, provide resources. That's where I tend to, I tend not to sign, and again, this is just personal, I tend not to sign petitions because I think they're worthless. But I will, call my local Congress people, even though it's pretty much a lost cause because I live in Kansas, and they don't agree with me. But yeah, we all have to find our own way in this. And the question of what we should do as a school is, I don't have an answer. I really don't, and it's something that will be on the teachers' agenda when we have our meeting in September. So Sunim, you will have a chance. Nancy, you will have a chance to weigh in on this and see what we should do. There's a lot of groups that send out these kind of empty things about we stand against this and that and the other, and I don't know. I want to encourage people to do something. That's what I want to do. But as I said, that's just personal. Yeah, it's tough, and other organizations are, in the Christian world, the churches divide by politics. You have your right-wing churches and your left-wing churches. And in the Buddhist world, I don't want this to happen. I mean, how many Zen centers are there in your town, wherever you happen to live? So we don't have the luxury of splitting into this political group or that political group, because to do that means cutting a whole bunch of people out of the possibility of practicing. So it's I don't want us to go the way that the Christian churches did, where the church you join tells everyone what your politics are. I don't want that to happen. So that's just my personal response. So thank you for your question. Yeah, we'll be talking about this for a long time to come. Yeah.
Very good answers. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? We've got, I think, 5 minutes. If there are any other questions.
Judy, someone early during the 9 to 9:30 brought, you answered one of her questions, but her other one had to do with practicing and making a commitment to practice and then not meeting that commitment, and the feelings that come up around that as well. And could you speak to that?
Oh, with pleasure. I think we have all had the experience. Anyone who's practiced for more than 2 minutes has had the experience of making a commitment and not meeting that commitment, right? Because your mind wanders. Wait, I said my mind wasn't going to wander, right? And, and we all have the experience of making a commitment of, I'm going to, sit on the cushion, for this many minutes every day at this time, and then somehow it doesn't happen. Um, and so um, there's this great Korean saying, maybe it's a general Northeast Asian saying, 7 times fall down, 8 times get up. And as a mathematician, this just drives me crazy because, you fall down, you get up, you go, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So when does the 8th time? And then some people say, well, when you stand up, that's the first time that you got up. But no, that's bullshit. It's 7 times fall down, 8 times get up is a metaphor. It says the important thing is the getting up. It's not the falling down. The important thing is the getting up. So the important thing is not that you didn't practice hard enough, or you didn't practice that enough, or you didn't practice at all. The important thing is that you practice again. That's the important thing. And I want to say that when my son turned 12, and he he was too, we would always hire babysitters so we could go off to the Zen Center. Poor kid, one or the other was always at the Zen Center, and then a few times a week, both of us were at the Zen Center. So this kid had a lot of babysitters, but when you're 12, you can't have babysitters anymore. And I thought, oh, I don't want to leave him home alone, so I just stopped coming to the Zen Center. And so at first I stopped coming to the Zen Center, but then I stopped practicing at home, and that was really interesting because I was a, hard-ass practitioner. I mean, I was practicing all the time, and I was going on solo retreats, and I was going on, real, retreats with other people, and I was doing all this stuff, and, and all of a sudden I just stopped practicing. It was really, and I believed in practice. It's not like I said, oh, practice is bullshit. I believed in practice. But here I was not practicing. And I still don't understand it. I still have no understanding consciously or unconsciously. I have no understanding of what this was. I just stopped practicing. And, my husband, was very concerned about this. And he's like, I'll practice with you. And I'm like, no, that would be worse. I don't want to practice with you. And he kept bugging me, you should practice, And finally I said, if you bug me, I will never practice again. And so he didn't bug me anymore. He didn't say anything about it. And then a few months after that, so this went on for like almost 2 years. And then a few months after that, I started sitting on my own at home, when he wasn't around, so he didn't know it. And I started sitting on my own. And I sat more and more regularly. And finally one day I said to him, I've been practicing for the last few months. Let's go to the Zen Center. And I give him credit. He didn't say, oh, frabjous day, kalu kale. He just said, okay. So I have this experience. And I'm really glad, as a teacher, I'm really glad that I had this experience. Because when people come to me and they say, I'm not practicing, I don't say, oh, you very bad person, Because I did it myself. I did it myself. So yeah, it's just 7 times fall down, 8 times get up. Don't lose your direction. And the other thing is, sometimes people don't practice because what they've set themselves is something that they're incapable of doing. I'm not judging them, but it doesn't fit into their life. Like maybe they have a small child, maybe they have a heavy work schedule, maybe they have a sick parent or a sick spouse. For some reason or other, they just set themselves something that they just simply can't do. So what I always tell people is set yourself something that you can do. And what I usually recommend, if this is the only thing you can do this. 4 great vows, 3 prostrations, sit for 10 minutes. There are very few people whose life situation doesn't allow that. So 4 great vows, so your direction is clear. 3 prostrations, sit for 10 minutes. And just try that for a long time. And, if you can do more, by all means do more. Like, 20 minutes twice a day, that's sort of the the sort of standard thing. But if you can't do that, set yourself something that's realistic that you know you can do, and then do it. And then when you're sitting and your mind wanders and you start thinking about this or that or the other, don't hit yourself over the head. Don't beat yourself up about it. Just say, oh, bring it back. Because when your mind wanders, your mind, you're going to see mind wanders and you see where it goes. Oh, look at that. And then you bring it back to your practice. So that's my advice, my suggestion. And just keep on trucking, keep doing it. And if you don't do it again. So thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Eileen. Wonderful talks, very helpful.